They called him a liar, a wannabe, a joke. But when two grown men tried to abduct him, he took them down in under 10 seconds. That's when the town realized the Delta boy wasn't bluffing. Rain hammered against the windows of Riverview High School the morning Tyrese Malone walked through its double doors for the first time. Drenched in mist and silence, he didn't carry the eager nerves of a typical transfer student. His posture was upright, too upright for a 17-year-old. His eyes, dark and calculating, scanned the hallway like he was surveying a battlefield. Backpack slung over one shoulder, Tyrese moved with a controlled stillness that made him stand out. He wasn't trying to be seen, but he was impossible to ignore. Room 212, he muttered to himself, checking his schedule again. His breath fogged the paper. Behind him, the crowded hallway of Riverview moved like a restless ocean of sneakers, laughter, and slammed lockers. But none of it seemed to affect him. That morning, Grandma Loretta, who'd taken him in just 3 weeks earlier, had gripped the steering wheel with her arthritic hands and said in a voice lined with fear and wisdom, "You keep your head down, baby. This town ain't like your last one." He didn't argue. He never did with her. Tyrese simply nodded, closed the door, and walked into the lion's den. The bell rang just as he slipped into a desk in the back of Mr. Wells's history class. Heads turned. 20 students stared at him like they were cataloging his every move before deciding whether to mock or ignore. "Ah, you must be Mr. Malone," Mr. Wells said cheerfully, a balding man with wire glasses and a coffee stain on his tie. "Welcome to modern American history. We're just about to start our new unit on warfare." Tyrese gave a single nod. No smile. No introduction. Just silence. Mr. Wells turned back to the board and scribbled in blue marker. "Veterans Day Tribute Assignment. As I was saying," he continued, "your next major assignment will be a personal essay about a veteran who's impacted your life. Family members are ideal, but you may also interview a local veteran if you don't have that connection." Groans echoed around the room. "Do we have to?" someone asked. A broad-shouldered boy in a varsity jacket, later revealed to be Jackson Whitfield, the star quarterback. "My grandpa just sells tractors," someone else muttered. Mr. Wells frowned. "You might be surprised how many military connections you don't know about. Anyone in this room have family who served?" A few hands rose halfway. Tyrese didn't raise his. He kept his head down. But something in Jackson's smug tone snapped his patience. He spoke quietly, "My father served." The room went still. All heads swiveled toward him again. "Excellent," Mr. Wells smiled. "Which branch?" Tyrese met his eyes directly. "Army. Delta Force." 2 seconds passed. Then came the laughter. Jackson slapped his desk and howled. "Delta Force? Come on, man. What is this? Call of Duty?" Students snorted, whispered, smirked. From the doorway came another voice, this one deeper, authoritative, and coated in sarcasm. "Delta Force? Huh? Been watching too many action flicks, kid." Deputy Ron Owens, the school's resource officer, stood leaning in the doorframe, arms crossed, badge gleaming under the fluorescence. His eyes locked onto Tyrese like a predator sizing up prey. "Everything all right in here, Mr. Wells?" Owens asked, stepping fully into the room. "We're fine, Deputy," Mr. Wells replied, clearly uncomfortable. Owens didn't leave. "You said your daddy was Delta?" he asked Tyrese, eyes narrowing. Tyrese stayed composed, body still, voice level. "Yes, sir." Owens scoffed. "You know how many boys I've heard say that? You think they just let anybody into Delta?" Tyrese replied without blinking, "They don't." "What's his name?" "Elijah Malone." Owens smirked. "Never heard of him." "You wouldn't have," Tyrese said. "That's kind of the point." A murmur ran through the class. Owens stepped closer, tension rising. "You calling me a liar, son?" "No, sir," Tyrese replied, unmoved. "Just stating a fact." Mr. Wells attempted to intervene. "Deputy, we're in the middle of." "You can laugh now," Tyrese cut in. "I still locked on Owens, but one day, you'll see him for yourself." That was the last straw. Principal's office. "Now," Owens barked. "Disruptive behavior." Tyrese stood calmly. No protest. No plea. He slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked past Jackson's desk, hearing the whispered nickname that would trail him for months. "Delta Boy." The hallway echoed with each footstep as Deputy Owens walked behind him, hovering too close. "You think you're funny?" the man hissed. "Making up stories?" Tyrese didn't answer. In the front office, Principal Ava Morgan looked up as they entered. She was a tall, graceful black woman with natural silver locks and a sharp mind. She took one look at Tyrese and saw a storm beneath still waters. What's the issue, deputy? She asked. New student making up Delta Force nonsense, disrupting class. Principal Morgan turned to Tyrese. Is that true? I answered a question, Tyrese said. That's all. I'd like to call his father, Owens insisted. He's deployed, Tyrese replied. My grandmother is my legal guardian. Principal Morgan nodded. We'll call her then. Outside her office, through thin walls, Tyrese heard the muffled argument. Don't escalate this, Ron. He's lying. Probably doesn't even know who his daddy is. Tyrese sat motionless. But inside, something burned. Miss Loretta arrived an hour later. She didn't scold, just placed a hand on his shoulder. Back in class, whispers grew into wildfire. By lunch, every table buzzed with some version of the legend. Delta boy, Special Forces kid, probably never even met his dad. Tyrese sat alone, eating the sandwich his grandma packed, one bite at a time, methodical. Then a kid with glasses sat down across from him. I'm Raphael, but people call me Raph, the boy said. We're in Algebra 2 together. Tyrese nodded. Is it true? Raph asked. About your dad? Depends what you've heard. That he's Delta Force. Tyrese chewed. Swallowed. Yes. Raph didn't laugh. That's cool. My dad runs a taco truck. Later in class, Tyrese noticed Raph struggling with an equation. Without a word, he slid his paper just far enough for Raph to see the work. After class, Raph caught up. Thanks. That algebra was brutal. Tyrese shrugged. No problem. You really have a dad in Delta Force? Tyrese paused. His eyes flicked to the side, thoughtful. He doesn't need people to believe. He just gets the job done. But not everyone stayed quiet. In the locker room before gym, Jackson cornered Tyrese with two teammates. Hey, Delta boy, Jackson smirked. My dad's a councilman. He knows every military family in this town. Never heard of any Malones. Not surprised, Tyrese said, pulling on his gym shirt. What's that supposed to mean? It means you don't know everything. Jackson stepped closer. You calling me stupid? I'm not calling you anything. You know what I think? Jackson jabbed a finger at him. I think your dad ran off. I think he's just some deadbeat who tells bedtime stories. Tyrese moved so fast, no one saw it coming. 1 second, calm. Next, inches from Jackson's face. No contact, just presence. Controlled, focused, dangerous. Don't talk about my father, he said quietly. A whistle shrieked. Coach Daniels stormed in. Standoff broken. But something had shifted. Even Jackson looked shaken. That evening, Tyrese stood at the sink drying dishes. Miss Loretta sipped tea in silence. Then, clink, the mail slot rattled. Tyrese picked up the pile. Bills. Ads. In one manila envelope. No return address. He opened it. Inside, a folded note with a strange symbol, an hourglass crossed by a dagger. Under it. Hold fast. The time will come. He folded it carefully. Slipped it into his pocket. What was it? Loretta asked. Nothing important, he replied. But his eyes told another story. The rain hadn't let up. It whispered against the windows of Miss Loretta's house as Tyrese woke before dawn, already dressed in his dark hoodie and fitted jeans before his grandmother shuffled into the kitchen. Without a word, he slid a plate of pancakes in front of her, alongside her orange pill container and a steaming mug of chicory coffee. You don't have to do all this, she mumbled, adjusting her reading glasses as she looked at the neatly laid table. I know, Tyrese said, flipping the last pancake onto the plate. But Dad asked me to help out. She stared at him for a moment. Your daddy always was a worrier. They didn't speak much more over breakfast. Words weren't necessary in this house. Miss Loretta believed in silence, and Tyrese had learned to live in it. But that morning, as he walked her to the porch swing and tucked a quilt around her legs, something unsettled buzzed beneath the calm surface. Across the street, Mr. Clancy, their nosy neighbor with a retired seeing-eye dog and too much time on his hands, stood watering his azaleas. When he spotted Tyrese, he raised a skeptical brow and walked across the lawn. Morning, Miss Loretta, Clancy said, stopping at the porch. That grandson of yours, he's a regular Boy Scout, huh? Haven't seen a teenager fold laundry since '94. Loretta smiled politely. He's a good one. Clancy leaned in conspiratorially. He's been telling the neighborhood kids that his daddy's in Delta Force. That true? She held his gaze without blinking. Elijah serves his country. That's all I'm allowed to say. Clancy scratched his chin. Funny. I don't recall seeing any soldier named Elijah Malone around here. Ever. Loretta's smile faded. That's because some people know how to stay hidden. Inside, Tyrese stood just beyond the screen door, listening to every word. His face gave nothing away, but his hands, the way they clutched the towel he'd been drying dishes with, were tense, tight. Mr. Clancy's voice drifted up again. Suppose we'll see if this Delta Daddy shows up for graduation next year or if he's off playing G.I. Joe somewhere else. Loretta's voice dropped ice. Nobody asked you, Frank. That ended the conversation. Minutes later, the phone rang, a landline, ancient and beige. Loretta answered, her voice neutral. But as she listened, her expression changed. Paled. Message received, she whispered. Then she hung up. Who was that? Tyrese asked from the doorway. Wrong number, she said too quickly. But the way her hand trembled. Tyrese knew better than to believe her. Back at Riverview High, the nickname had stuck like a stain. Delta Boy. It chased him down hallways. Followed him into lunch. Clung to the back of his neck during chemistry class. Mr. Wells never mentioned the confrontation again, but he eyed Tyrese now with something between caution and curiosity. Other teachers treated him like a quiet storm, too strange to approach, too steady to ignore. Except for Mr. Alvarez, the advanced placement history teacher. Short, compact, with salt and pepper hair and the walk of someone who'd spent years marching in deserts, Alvarez found Tyrese by the vending machines after last bell. Malone, he said, voice clipped. Walk with me. Tyrese followed without hesitation. In the empty classroom, Alvarez closed the door and turned slowly. I served, he said. 82nd Airborne. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Before I became a teacher. Tyrese waited. Your father? He's really Delta? Yes, sir. Alvarez studied him. You don't talk much. Only when there's something worth saying, sir. That earned him the ghost of a smile. Smart answer. Alvarez tapped the desk. I'll be watching you. Not because I don't believe you, but because I do. That afternoon, Tyrese noticed Alvarez watching him from the faculty parking lot as he walked to the bus stop. Not hostile, just calculated. As though connecting invisible threads. The next day, Luis, Raf's real name, sat beside Tyrese again at lunch. I'm having a birthday thing on Saturday, Luis said. Just pizza. Video games. Nothing big. Wanna come? Tyrese paused mid-bite. Thanks, but I can't. Gotta help my grandma. Next time. Maybe. Later that night, when Miss Loretta had gone to bed, Tyrese slipped out the back door and into the shadows. He ran 5 miles. Not the jogging kind of run. This was calculated. His route mapped around cameras, streetlights, and blind corners. He moved through the dark like it welcomed him. At the playground, he did pull-ups on the monkey bars. Then, under the oak tree near the creek, he sat and flipped through a worn Army field manual. Every word, every page, memorized. He almost didn't notice the car across the street. Engine off. Lights out. But inside, 2 men. They watched him. Didn't move. Didn't speak. When Tyrese stood, the car quietly pulled away. He said nothing when he returned home. But the next morning, on the way to school, he took a different route. Then another. He doubled back. Changed corners. When he arrived at Miss Loretta's that evening, the same car sat quietly at the corner. Inside the house, smoke billowed from the kitchen. Grandma, he called, stepping in. Miss Loretta turned, startled, at the sink. She was burning something. Tyrese caught the flash of flame just before she doused it. What are you burning? Old bills, she said too fast. Nothing important. But he'd seen the envelope. Manila. No return address. Was it another message from Dad? She avoided his eyes. Some ghosts are better left sleeping. What does that mean? It means you should be focused on being a normal teenager. He didn't respond. Just stared at her until she softened again. I'm sorry, baby, she said quietly. I'm just worried. Across town, at the Riverview Police Department, Deputy Owens hunched over his desk, scrolling through Tyrese's school file. Nothing unusual. Basic demographics. No record of the father. He picked up the phone. Yeah, it's Owens. I need you to check something. Military database. Elijah Malone. Allegedly Delta Force. A pause. Then frustration. I know it's classified. Just see what you can find. The next day, after final bell, Mr. Alvarez found Tyrese again. I served with a man once, he said, who went Delta. He vanished during a mission. Codename Black Echo. Never found the body. Tyrese's eyes flicked up at that name. You remind me of him, Alvarez continued. The way you stand. Watch. The way you wait for things most people don't even see. What was his name? Tyrese asked. Classified, Alvarez replied. but he was the best man I ever knew. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to Tyrese. If you ever need help, that's my address. My door's always open to a soldier's son. That evening, as Tyrese walked home through the alley behind the local grocery store, a black van pulled in from the opposite side. 2 men. Masks. No hesitation. Got him. One barked, lunging. But Tyrese was faster. He dropped his backpack and moved. In less than 10 seconds, one attacker was coughing blood from a crushed windpipe, and the other lay unconscious with a dislocated shoulder, knife kicked out of reach. Tyrese stood over them, breathing slow, controlled. He reached for his phone. "I'd like to report an attempted abduction," he said calmly, then gave the address. As sirens howled in the distance, Tyrese disappeared into the night, like a ghost in combat boots. By morning, every officer in the Riverview Police Department was huddled around a single screen, silent, transfixed. The grainy surveillance footage played on loop. 1 teenager. 2 full-grown masked attackers. In just under 10 seconds, Tyrese Malone took them both down with terrifying precision. No wasted motion. No panic. Just clean, practiced violence that left both men incapacitated before they could register what hit them. "Play it again," Deputy Owens demanded, his face flushed with rising tension. The video restarted. The room watched again as the young man ducked under a punch, struck the first man in the throat, pivoted, and used his momentum to hurl him into a stack of wooden pallets. Then, without pause, Tyrese disarmed the second attacker, delivering 3 lightning-fast strikes that knocked the man unconscious. "Freeze it right there," Owens said, pointing at the screen. The technician paused the video at the moment Tyrese's fist connected with the attacker's temple. His form was textbook. "That's not street brawling," Owens muttered. "That's military." Chief Wallace, a heavy-set man with an air of gruff disinterest, scratched his chin. "Kid's got skills. I'll give him that." "Too convenient," Owens snapped. No license plate on the van. No fingerprints. And both suspects posted bail within hours, paid in full, then vanished. "You think he faked the attack?" "I think." Owens crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "There's more to this Delta boy than anyone realizes." By second period, the footage had gone viral. Students crowded around phones and hallways, their mockery of Delta boy curdling into something new: curiosity, fear, and whispered awe. "Where'd he learn to fight like that?" Jackson muttered to his football buddies at lunch. "He's 17. That was some Jason Bourne stuff." No one had answers, but everyone had opinions. That afternoon, Principal Morgan summoned Tyrese to her office. He entered with steady steps, unbothered by the stares he passed along the way. Owens was already waiting inside. Another officer sat beside him, plain clothes, older, his expression unreadable. "Tyrese," Principal Morgan said carefully, "we need to talk about what happened yesterday." "I was attacked," Tyrese said simply. "I defended myself." "One of those men has a crushed larynx," Owens growled. The other, dislocated shoulder, cracked ribs. "You want to explain how a high school student managed that?" "They had a knife." "Where'd you learn to fight like that?" the other officer asked, leaning forward. "My father taught me." "Self-defense." Owens scoffed. "You're Delta Force father, right?" He made exaggerated air quotes. "The one nobody's seen." Principal Morgan threw him a sharp look. "Deputy, please." Tyrese looked between them. "I'm not answering more questions without my guardian." "This isn't an interrogation," Morgan assured him. "We're just concerned about your safety." "Then I'd like to go home." After a tense pause, she nodded. "I think that's best. We're placing you on a 1-week suspension. For safety reasons, not as punishment." Tyrese stood. Owens blocked his path. "This isn't over, Carter." "Not by a long shot." Tyrese met his stare without blinking. "I know." Miss Loretta was waiting in the front office, her small frame stiff with tension. She didn't speak until the car doors were shut and the engine was humming. "You promised," she said quietly, voice trembling. "You promised you wouldn't use those techniques unless your life was in danger." "It was," Tyrese replied, staring straight ahead. "You could have run. They would have caught me. There were 2 of them." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "Now everyone knows. The police. The school. You might as well have put up a billboard." "I didn't have a choice." The drive home was silent, save for the ticking of the old turn signal. As they pulled into the driveway, Miss Loretta turned to him, her voice suddenly breaking. "Your father is alive," she whispered. "But the world thinks he's dead, for good reason." Tyrese stared at her. His carefully constructed calm faltered for the first time. "What?" "That's all I can tell you. But the men who attacked you, they weren't random. They were looking for you. Specifically." Why? Because of who your father is. Because of what he knows. Tyrese stood in the middle of the living room, the weight of her words sinking deep. The letters, he said slowly. They're from him, aren't they? She nodded. I burned them after reading, just like he told me to. Why didn't you tell me? To protect you. Miss Loretta set down her teacup. Her hands were shaking again. Some things, once known, can't be forgotten. At the police station, Deputy Owens sat in his office flipping through reports when his phone rang. He answered immediately. They posted bail, the caller said. Gone without a trace. No IDs. No fingerprints. Cash job. Foreign. Could be. One had a tattoo. Eastern European design. Black Ops style. Owens gritted his teeth. This is bigger than some punk kid. I want surveillance on that house. 24/7. The chief won't approve that. He's a minor. Not a suspect. Then I'll do it myself. That night, Tyrese sat by his window, writing in a small black notebook labeled Legacy Protocol. Each entry detailed the watchers outside, their license plates, habits, hand placements on gear. He drew diagrams of their rotations. He logged timestamps with precision. A memory returned. He was 9. A remote facility. His father, Elijah Malone, kneeling in front of him, gripping his small shoulders. If anything ever happens to me, Elijah had said, protect your grandmother. Stay invisible. Wait for the signal. What signal? Young Tyrese had asked. You'll know. When the time comes, you'll know. The next day, Mr. Alvarez was organizing paperwork when a knock interrupted his rhythm. Deputy Owens stepped inside, uninvited. Got a minute, teacher? Alvarez gestured to an empty desk. What can I do for Riverview's finest? Tyrese Malone. You've been talking to him. I talk to all my students. Don't play dumb. You've been watching him. Since day one. Alvarez crossed his arms. And you've been harassing him. Since day one. You don't find it suspicious? The fighting, the secrecy, the way he handles himself. You don't find it suspicious that a law enforcement officer is so obsessed with one student? Owen stepped closer. You're protecting him. What? Alvarez's voice turned to steel. Because I served. I recognize excellence. Maybe you should try it sometime. Owen sneered. Keep pushing, teacher. See where it gets you. When Owens left, Alvarez walked to his desk drawer and pulled out a burner phone. He hadn't used it in years. He dialed a secure number and waited. It's me, he said. The boy's been compromised. The timeline needs to accelerate. That evening, back in Owens's darkened home, his laptop screen flickered. A file downloaded itself. He hadn't clicked anything. Red alerts. Unauthorized access warnings. Then, an open classified document. Operation Black Echo. He scrolled through fragmented lines. Redacted details. Broken logs. Then a name. Operative code name, Reaper. Status, MIA. Not Kia. Last known location, secure extraction zone, signal lost. A name began to emerge from the lines of encrypted code, only part visible, Legion M. Before he could finish reading, the screen went black, then returned to normal. Owen sat back in his chair, heart pounding. Someone had wanted him to see that. Someone with clearance. As midnight blanketed Riverview, a figure stood across from the Malone house in shadow, avoiding every security camera, every beam of light. He moved with eerie familiarity. His face bore scars. His eyes, sharp, alert, and unmistakably connected to the boy behind the window. Elijah Malone was home, and he was watching. The night air over Riverview was thick with static, like the whole town was holding its breath. And somewhere deep in the heart of it, truth was about to rupture through lies like a bullet through glass. At exactly 8 a.m., Elijah Malone walked through the front doors of the Riverview Police Department like a storm made flesh. Dressed in full military uniform, decorated with ribbons most officers had only seen in textbooks. He moved like a man who didn't ask for permission. He took it. The desk sergeant looked up and froze. I need to speak with whoever's in charge, Elijah said, placing his U.S. Army CID credentials flat on the desk like a hammer of God. Now, inside, the air went quiet. Deputy Owens, nursing a headache and a bruised ego, looked up from his desk to see the ghost he thought was dead. Standing, alive, and very, very real. Sergeant Malone. Owens greeted him, trying to sound unaffected. Master Sergeant. Elijah corrected without blinking. We need to talk. Privately. The chief's office was cleared, its occupant nowhere in sight. Almost like the building itself sensed who held the upper hand now. Behind closed doors, Elijah and Owens stood face to face, uniforms a universe apart in meaning and respect. "You made a mistake," Elijah said coldly. "You targeted my son, mocked him, publicly humiliated him, accused him of being a fraud, when all he did was survive and attack your department. Can't even explain." "I was doing my job," Owens snapped. "A kid shows up with fantasy stories and puts 2 men in the hospital? That's a threat." Elijah's eyes narrowed. "Then let me lay it out. On September 12th, you laughed in his face. On the 14th, you told the principal he was lying. On October 5th, you accessed classified military servers without clearance, violating federal law. And yesterday, you stood in front of an entire student body and declared him a liar again." Owens' jaw tightened. "How do you know all that?" Elijah leaned in, placing a small black card on the desk, coated in silver embossing, marked with an eagle and a cryptographic seal. "Because we've been watching," Elijah said. "Because you didn't just poke the bear, deputy. You set fire to the den." Owens stared down at the card. His hand twitched near his belt, but he didn't dare move. "You accessed a file labeled Operation Black Echo," Elijah continued. "You weren't supposed to see that. And whoever let you, they played you. Because that was bait." Owens' mask cracked. "Is it true?" he whispered. "About Reaper?" Elijah's stare hardened into steel. "Some questions shouldn't be asked by men who can't handle the answers." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "My son is not a weapon. He's not a threat. He's a legacy. And if you ever come near him, or my mother, again, your badge won't protect you from what's coming." Word spread through Riverview High like wildfire with rocket fuel. Tyrese's father was real. He was Delta. He was here. And he was pissed. Students gossiped in hushed clusters. Teachers whispered in break rooms. And in the middle of it all, Tyrese returned to school, unflinching, flanked by 2 plainclothes federal agents who peeled off once he passed the front doors. In the hall, even Jackson stepped aside. In Mr. Wells's classroom, nobody dared mock him. Not anymore. After class, Mr. Alvarez found Tyrese at his locker and gave a single respectful nod. The silent code between soldiers. One passed, one rising. In contrast, Deputy Owens was nowhere to be found. His usual patrol of the halls had vanished, replaced by a new resource officer, a tall, alert woman who watched everything and said nothing. But the moment of calm didn't last. After school, Tyrese climbed into a black SUV and was driven not home, but to a secure safe house, a temporary location guarded by rotating teams of intelligence operatives. Miss Loretta had been moved earlier that morning. She sat now by a sunlit window, a wool blanket over her lap, her face lined with worry and decades of secrets. When Tyrese entered, she looked up and whispered, "He's back, isn't he?" Tyrese nodded. "Yeah, and it's not over." As the agents gave them space, she placed her wrinkled hand over his. "Your father's not the only one with secrets," she said softly. "I was Army intelligence for 30 years, baby. I helped write the protocols he's been following. And I helped build legacy." Tyrese's breath caught. "You knew." "I intercepted a transmission 4 years ago. That's how I knew he was alive. But I stayed quiet. To protect you. Both of you." Her voice cracked. "They used our program to train children for war. I never meant for that." Across town, Mr. Alvarez received a knock at his apartment door. When he opened it, Elijah Malone stood there, now in civilian clothes, though no less lethal. "Staff Sergeant Alvarez," Elijah said. 82nd Airborne. 2003 to 2015, Alvarez replied, stepping aside. Inside, over 2 glasses of whiskey, they spoke like men who'd both seen death and walked away from it. "You saved my life in Kandahar," Alvarez said. "Checkpoint 3. The IED that didn't go off." Elijah nodded. "You weren't supposed to know. Hard to forget the man who pulled me back from a tripwire." Elijah raised his glass. "You've been watching over my son." "Thank you." Alvarez raised his too. "What happens now?" Elijah's answer was swift. "We go on the offensive. He's ready, but he needs someone I trust. You've got me." That same evening, a black government sedan rolled up to Riverview Town Hall. Inside, General William Bradford, stripped of his usual decorations, faced grim as he entered a private room. The mayor, police chief, council members sat waiting. Bradford spoke without prelude. "A special operator and his family are now in your town. The boy, Tyrese Malone, is the last known surviving legacy operator. That means Riverview is now part of a national security operation. Cooperate or disappear." No one argued. But one man in that room, Councilman Whitfield, Jackson's father, shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't surprised. He was terrified. In a dark van across town, a handler watched the Malone house through a scope. The image zoomed in, Elijah and Tyrese embracing on the front lawn. Target in sight, the handler reported. Operation Vulture Shade is a go. At a secluded facility tucked in the Georgia pines, Tyrese moved like a shadow through a simulated kill house, clearing rooms, marking targets, exiting in under 90 seconds. His instructors, some of the best in the country, watched with jaws tight and notebooks full. He's been doing this since he was a kid, one whispered. He doesn't hesitate. He calculates. Then he hits. In a quiet moment, an instructor approached him. Most kids your age struggle with calculus. You're memorizing infiltration protocols. Tyrese looked up. Not my first time. The instructor nodded. Your father broke the rules training you like this. But now? Now I see why. That same day, Elijah was summoned to a classified tribunal in the Pentagon. A room of 5, faces that had altered governments, sat waiting. Black Echo, a woman with silver hair, said, "Tell us the truth." Elijah stood at parade rest. "We were betrayed," he said flatly. "Not by the enemy, but by a rogue element inside our own intelligence community. They sold us out. 3 made it out. 5 presumed Kia. I was one of the 3. Why not report it? I tried. My safe house was hit 3 days later. 2 more operators died. That's when I disappeared. I had a son to protect. A legacy to preserve." He handed over a drive. "All of it's here. Logs. Files. Transfer records. Surveillance. And the final kicker? Your own man, General Bradford, was the leak." The room went still. One whispered, "Legacy protocol was terminated years ago." Elijah's eyes narrowed. "Officially, yes. Unofficially, it was hijacked. And my son is the last piece." Back in Riverview, Owen sat alone in his patrol car, watching Luis exit school. The one friend Tyrese trusted. Owen's phone rang. "We found something," a voice said. Owens wasn't assigned to Riverview by chance. His entire placement was orchestrated. What? He's a plant. A sleeper. Probably doesn't even know it. Owens's blood ran cold. That night, at Miss Loretta's safe house, Tyrese returned. Rain soaked through his jacket, but his grip was dry and steady as he handed her a single slip of paper. "It's time," he said. "What is that?" she asked. "The final instructions. Phase Omega. He left it for me. The next mission wouldn't be about survival. It would be about exposure, justice, and making damn sure the people who lit the match would burn in their own fire." To be continued in Segment 5, Ambush at Dawn. The sky over Georgia cracked open just before dawn, not with thunder, but with fire. The explosion hit the training facility like a sledgehammer. Tyrese bolted upright in his bunk, heart already accelerating into mission mode. Orange flames danced through the windows where the communications building had stood just minutes earlier. The blaring sirens barely registered. His instincts drowned everything out except one fact. They were under attack. Not some training drill. This was real. And it was surgical. He hit the floor, rolled to his gear, yanked his vest over his head, and grabbed the go bag he'd kept packed since his first night at the compound. Smoke slithered through the vents. Gunfire cracked in bursts, tight, controlled. Not panic fire. Professionals. He moved through the hallway, low and fast, just as another explosion ripped through the northern wing. Trainees screamed. Instructors barked orders. The entire facility had devolved into chaos, but Tyrese had eyes only for one destination, the comms building. His father had been inside it before the attack. 2 instructors rushed past, one bloodied and limping. "They hit the north entrance first," he shouted. "We've lost comms." They knew exactly where to strike. Tyrese grabbed his arm. "Where's my father?" The man grimaced. "Last seen inside, pulling mission files from Black Echo." "That building's gone, son." The words hit like a steel rod to the chest. But Tyrese didn't freeze. He processed, evaluated, prioritized. "Don't go back in there," the instructor warned, but Tyrese was already gone. He darted through the debris-filled courtyard, keeping low behind overturned carts and smoldering crates. Smoke choked the air. Bullet holes perforated the walls. Trainees returned fire from behind sandbag barricades hastily formed. One of them, a girl with a busted lip, saw him and shouted, "They've got air support." Drones overhead. He barely heard her. He slipped through a breached window near the east wing and took the maintenance tunnels to the back perimeter. When he emerged, he saw the real scale of the assault, a dozen armed figures in black tactical gear, moving in perfect sync, clearing rooms like ghosts. These weren't random mercs. These were trained killers. Then he saw the insignia on the arm patch of one of the assailants crouching behind a stairwell. It wasn't military. It was Trident security. And leading them, no mistaking it now, was Deputy Owens, stripped of the badge, now clad in full combat gear, barking orders through a throat mic. Tyrese froze behind a cement wall, a cold blade of rage slicing through the fog. This wasn't just revenge. Owens had been waiting for this moment. Contact front. Another instructor shouted. Tyrese ducked his bullets whizzed inches above his head. He moved again, ducking through an emergency exit, lungs burning. Every second that passed made one thing clearer. This attack wasn't meant to destroy the facility. It was meant to capture him. He was the target, and he was now alone. Suddenly, headlights cut through the smoke as an armored SUV skidded to a stop 10 feet from him. The driver, female, short-cropped hair, military bearing, yanked the door open. Orders from command. Get the boy out. Now. I'm not leaving without my father. She glared. We don't have a pulse on him. That's not your call anymore. He hesitated. Then the building behind him erupted into flame, the pressure wave knocking him into the SUV. She slammed the door. Tires screamed. Tyrese looked through the rear window, watching the only place he'd ever felt understood disappear in fire and smoke. The comms came alive. Multiple hostiles confirmed. 2 instructors Kia. Master Sergeant Elijah Malone, status unknown. Those words landed like gunshots to the chest. Back in Riverview, phones buzzed simultaneously. Alert. Riverview High School. Lockdown immediate. Bomb threat reported. Shelter in place. This is not a drill. The students froze. Teachers bolted their doors. Principal Morgan's voice came through the intercom. Tight, strained, but calm. All personnel implement Shelter Protocol Alpha. I repeat, this is not a drill. In the history classroom, Mr. Alvarez's stomach dropped. He recognized the tactic instantly. This wasn't about a bomb. This was a distraction. Controlled panic meant to flush someone out. He scanned the room quickly, then saw Luis, eyes wide, head already turning toward the door. Sir, Luis whispered as he crept toward Alvarez's desk. This isn't about a threat, is it? Alvarez kept his tone steady. No. It's about flushing the system. They're coming for anyone tied to Tyrese. He reached for Luis's phone. Let me see that. He checked it once, then scowled. There's a GPS tracker running. They've been watching your movements. Who? I don't know yet, but we're getting you out of here. He started ushering small groups of students into a service corridor rarely used except during fire drills. No questions. Just go. Quietly. Luis hesitated. Why aren't we going to the football field? Change of plans. Alvarez's voice was like stone. Meanwhile, police cruisers surrounded the school. SWAT vans parked curbside. Bomb squads entered. But conspicuously absent from the response was Owens. His name was mentioned over the radio. Silence followed. Anyone got eyes on Owens? Negative. Called in sick this morning. Inside the school, Alvarez turned to Luis. We need to contact your uncle. Now. Then get you out. He pulled a burner phone from the bottom drawer of his desk. Dialed. Too late. A white van pulled up just as Luis stepped outside the building. The side door slid open. 2 men. Strong hands. Luis was gone before he could scream. At the secure house, Tyrese arrived in a state somewhere between fury and grief. His jacket was torn, his knuckles bleeding, his voice barely above a whisper. Where is she? He asked. Miss Loretta had collapsed 30 minutes earlier. Stress-induced stroke. The paramedics had stabilized her, but she was unconscious, her face pale, lips dry, a quiet hum of machines monitoring every heartbeat. Tyrese's body swayed. He grabbed the doorframe. No, no, no. He pressed his forehead to her hand. I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean, but the words collapsed before they left his throat. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text. We have your friend. Legacy protocol for his life. Come alone. Attached, a GPS pin. A warehouse. Edge of town. Miss Loretta's fingers twitched in the bed. Her eyes fluttered slightly. Tyrese turned to the nearest agent. I need backup. Orders are to keep you here. He shook his head. I'm not asking. When they turned their backs, he vanished. Just like his father had taught him. Moments later, Elijah Malone stormed through the hospital doors, face smeared with soot, one arm bleeding beneath a torn sleeve. Where is she? He barked. A nurse pointed. Room 212. Stroke. Not critical. Yet. He entered, saw her, and his knees nearly buckled. "Mama," he whispered, kneeling. "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." She stirred faintly, but when he looked around and saw the empty chair near the wall, Tyrese's chair, his stomach dropped. "He's not here." The agent guarding the room looked nervous. "Sir, we thought he was with you." Elijah's expression went deadly calm. He pulled his phone. One new message. From Tyrese. "We don't run. They have Luis. Going in." He read it once. Twice. Then grabbed his rifle and left without another word. Across town, Principal Morgan sat at her desk reviewing security footage. A knock startled her. She looked up. Deputy Owens stood in the doorway. Uniform spotless. Smile like a mask over something darker. "Just checking in," he said, stepping inside. Following up on the threat. She frowned. "The all-clear came an hour ago." "I need names," he said, voice turning cold. "Anyone close to Tyrese. Friends. Teachers. Anyone he might have told something." She reached under her desk, pressing the silent panic button. "You'll need a warrant for that." His jaw clenched. "Let me be clear. Those names aren't optional." The phone rang. She picked it up. "Yes, he's here." "Yes, I understand." She met Owens's gaze, calm and steady. "That was the Army liaison. They're sending a team. Right now." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Owens didn't wait. He vanished out the side door. At the warehouse, Tyrese crouched outside, observing. Thermal scans, 8 heat signatures. 7 adult. 1 smaller. Luis. Guards moved like soldiers. Not gangsters. These were trained. Armed. Methodical. He memorized the camera positions. Guard patterns. Weak spots in the perimeter. Then he got to work. 3 small diversions set across the compound. Nothing lethal. Just confusion. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the first device triggered. An explosion of light and sound on the east side. Guards ran. Tyrese slipped inside. He moved like liquid shadow, stepping over creaking pipes and ducking under flickering lights. He found Luis in a central room, tied to a chair, lip bleeding but alive. "To your left," Luis whispered as Tyrese cut the bonds. Armed, they moved together, silent, calculated, perfect. They were almost out when a backup generator kicked in. Lights exploded on. "Run!" Tyrese barked, shoving Luis toward the exit. 3 guards blocked their path. Tyrese emptied his clip. 1, 2, 3. Then, behind him, a door burst open. Elijah stood there, rifle raised, expression cold. "Down," he shouted. Tyrese dropped his 3 precise shots, ended the fight. They drove into the darkness, Luis shaken but alive. "How did you find me?" Tyrese asked. Elijah tapped the stitching on Tyrese's jacket. "Tracker. You think I'd let you go without insurance?" But his face didn't relax. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The warehouse behind them was already fading into the shadows as the SUV tore down the backroads of Riverview. But Tyrese couldn't stop watching it shrink in the rearview mirror. Smoke still lingered in the air, curling against the glass like a memory refusing to vanish. Luis sat beside him, arms wrapped around himself, eyes wide and unblinking, not from fear but from the shock of still being alive. Elijah drove without a word, his knuckles white against the wheel, every motion efficient, controlled, but his silence was louder than a scream. The weight of it filled the vehicle. "He was going to kill me," Luis finally muttered. "Owens, he was going to shoot me in the head like it was nothing." Tyrese glanced at him, voice low. "He wanted me to watch." Elijah's jaw tightened. "He didn't expect you to get out." "He talked like he knew everything," Luis continued, voice shaking now. "About the legacy protocol. About your father. About you. Like it was personal." Elijah didn't answer. He just kept driving. But Tyrese could feel it. His father wasn't just angry. He was calculating. The kind of cold calculation that meant something bigger was coming. By the time they reached the safe house, agents were already waiting, weapons drawn, medics on standby, the air electric with urgency. The moment they stepped out of the SUV, Tyrese's presence sent the compound into controlled chaos. One of the intel officers approached Elijah immediately. "We have a problem," he said under his breath. Elijah gave a nod, sent Luis with a medic, and motioned Tyrese to follow him inside. "What now?" Tyrese asked, exhausted but alert. The agent handed over a tablet. Encrypted footage intercepted through a military backdoor. It was a trace from Ree, the hacker Luis has been working with. He broke into the Black Echo archives again. This time, he found a name. Elijah took the tablet. His face froze as the screen displayed a still frame, A man in uniform shaking hands with a known terrorist intermediary. The facial recognition tag read, Bradford, William, General, Homeland Security Liaison. Elijah's voice dropped to a rasp. He was in Riverview 2 days ago, advising the mayor on security coordination. Tyrese's blood ran cold. So he was never here to help us. He was here to erase us. Elijah looked at his son for a long moment, the silence between them carved from something harder than stone. Exactly. That night, while Louise slept under guard, Tyrese sat alone in the tactical planning room, studying the digital renderings of Riverview's Central War Memorial. He traced the outlines with his fingertip. The memorial didn't just honor fallen soldiers, it sat above something no civilian would have suspected, a secure vault, once used by Elijah's Delta team to store critical intelligence in the event of operational failure. Phase Omega. The last contingency. The proof. You think it's still there? He asked as Elijah entered, now in full Black Ops attire. If it's not, his father replied, then we've already lost. At 3 a.m., father and son moved through Riverview like shadows, slipping past sleepy neighborhoods and into the center of the park. The war memorial loomed ahead, cold, granite, and drenched in moonlight. They approached without speaking. Tyrese kneeled, found the engraved nameplate his father had once shown him in a memory that now felt like prophecy. He slid his glove beneath the edge, pressed twice, paused, then once more. A faint mechanical click echoed through the base. Elijah stepped forward, lifted a panel of stone no one else would have known could move, and there it was, a hardened black case, sealed with a biometric lock. He pressed his thumb to it. The light turned green. Inside were 3 things: a cluster of encrypted drives, a bundle of printed documents wrapped in a red Delta ribbon, and a single handwritten note in Elijah's neat, meticulous handwriting. Tyrese picked it up. It read, "If you're reading this, you are the final guardian. The line ends with you." He looked up at Elijah, who simply nodded once. "It means if I fall, you carry the truth." Tyrese swallowed hard, suddenly aware of just how heavy the word legacy really was. Neither of them noticed the glint of glass in the distance. A sniper scope. Watching. Tracking. A finger hovered over a trigger. And then, without warning, the night shattered. The first explosion came from the east side of the park, a thunderclap of smoke and heat designed not to kill, but to disorient. Tyrese was on his feet instantly, grabbing the case, his father already spinning toward the source. Figures emerged from the tree line, tactical gear, night vision, suppressed weapons. Another team. Owens wasn't done. They weren't retreating. They were escalating. This was a setup, Elijah growled, grabbing Tyrese's shoulder and dragging him behind the statue. They followed us here. They want the files, Tyrese muttered. They want me. Not tonight. Elijah pulled out a comms device. Vulture control, this is Reaper. We are compromised at Site Echo 2. Hostiles inbound. Extraction priority, Legacy 1. The voice on the other end was flat. Understood. ETA 7 minutes. That was too long. They moved like liquid through the smoke, using the park's layout to their advantage, laying traps as they fell back toward the outer perimeter. Tyrese handled himself like someone twice his age, movement sharp, deliberate, trained. Every turn they made was calculated. Every shot was deliberate. But they were being flanked. Owens wasn't coming with the team. He brought a small army. Then, to the chaos, came a wild card. Hunter Whitfield, the football star, the guy who once mocked Tyrese the loudest, emerged from behind a utility shed, eyes wide, a handgun shaking in his grip. "Tyrese," he gasped. "Is that you? What the hell are you doing here?" Tyrese demanded. "Following my dad," Hunter stammered. "He's in on this. He's working with them. With Owens." I didn't know how deep it went. A shot cracked through the air, barely missing Tyrese's head. Hunter Dove tackled him behind a bench. "Sniper. Visitor center. Northeast rooftop." Elijah responded instantly, raising his rifle and firing a clean, 3-shot burst. The figure on the rooftop slumped. "You brought a civilian," he snapped. "Get him out or get him down." More gunfire erupted as they moved. Tyrese turned to Hunter, breathing hard. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I was wrong," Hunter said, eyes blazing. "And because if what my dad is doing is even half true, I can't be part of it." Suddenly, a black van crashed through the south gate, tires screeching, floodlights flaring on the trio. The side door slid open and Owen stood there in full tactical armor, face devoid of warmth. "Carter," he bellowed. "Send out the boy and the files. This ends tonight." Elijah raised his weapon, but it was too late. Flashbangs hit the ground. Smoke detonated. In the chaos, Tyrese was grabbed, yanked backward into the van. He fought hard, elbowed, kicked, bit, but the numbers overwhelmed him. A fist caught him in the jaw. Darkness spun. Inside the van, Owens stared down at him, crouching. "You look just like him," he said quietly. "Same eyes. Same arrogance." "You'll never win," Tyrese growled, blood in his mouth. "That's the difference between us." "You still think this is about winning," Owens replied. "I just want what should have been mine. I was supposed to be Delta. Your father took that from me. I trained beside him. I earned it. Then he reported me, said I was unstable." "He was right," Tyrese spat. "You're a coward hiding behind a badge and a grudge." Owens leaned in close. "Legacy protocol was my redemption, but your father burned it down. And now? You're going to help me rebuild it." "Willingly." Tyrese smirked. "You're dumber than I thought." Unseen, Tyrese's fingers moved along the seam of his boot, locating the hidden compartment Elijah had stitched in. His hand closed around the small plastic trigger. "There's something my father taught me," Tyrese said, locking eyes with Owens. "About worst-case scenarios." "What's that?" "Always have an exit strategy." The charge detonated, blasting out the back axle. The van veered, flipped, crashed into a light post, sparks flying. Tyrese was thrown against the door but braced enough to recover. He clawed toward the back, kicked it open, crawled out onto the pavement. Sirens in the distance. Boots pounding. Orders shouted. He ran. Behind him, Owens lay bleeding against the van wall, dazed and furious. But Tyrese never looked back. He had the case. He had the truth. And for the first time in his life, he had them running scared. Tyrese didn't stop running. Blood trickled down his temple, ribs screaming with each breath, but he moved like a ghost fueled by fury. He ran until the woods swallowed the streetlights, until the sounds of pursuit melted into the night. When he finally dropped behind a fallen pine and caught his breath, he reached for the case still strapped across his back. Intact. That meant it was time. He pulled out the encrypted drive, clipped a fiber cable into the transmitter sewn into his boot sole, Elijah's failsafe, and activated it. A soft green pulse blinked to life. The signal went live. 30 seconds later, halfway across the city, Ree's terminal lit up like a Christmas tree. The hacker stared at the screen, disbelief flashing across his face. "Holy," he muttered, fingers flying. "That's Phase Omega. That's all of it." He tapped into news networks. Routed access through Iceland, then through Kenya, then Sweden. By the time he uploaded the documents, declassified mission logs, encrypted blacklists, audio of Owens and General Bradford discussing erasure of Asset Legacy 1, it was untraceable. Within 4 minutes, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News all had it. Within 5, it was trending worldwide. Hashtag Legacy Protocol, hashtag Delta Boy Files, hashtag Elijah Carter did not die. Then came the video. Tyrese had included it in the drive. Footage from a hidden drone Elijah had launched before the assault. It showed everything. Owens ordering the raid on the training facility, Bradford signing off on operational silence, and most damning of all, Owens standing over Miss Loretta's hospital file, muttering shut her down before she remembers anything. The internet caught fire. At the FBI regional office, phones began ringing. Internal Affairs launched emergency inquiries. Homeland Security's director was pulled from a golf retreat in Arizona. Defense Department servers went dark. Too late. The world knew. And Tyrese? He was nowhere to be found. Back at the hospital, Elijah stood outside Miss Loretta's room, his body still as a statue, eyes locked on the television above the nurse's desk. The headline crawling across the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking. Black Ops files leaked. Whistleblower reveals decades of covert abuse." He exhaled slowly, almost reverently. The job was only half done, but the silence he'd carried for years was broken. That was the first win. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Principal Morgan. Her voice soft but resolute. "They're suspending Owens. The mayor resigned 30 minutes ago. And Hunter's testimony matched everything your son released." Elijah turned, the edges of his expression softening. "They didn't just try to bury me. They built a system to erase anyone who remembered." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said quietly, "everyone remembers." At City Hall, chaos reigned. Press circled like vultures. Councilman Whitfield, his once arrogant demeanor reduced to sweat and muttered curses, was dragged through the rotunda by U.S. Marshals. "I didn't sign that order. I was misled," he shouted. "I was told it was anti-terrorism." A journalist threw a mic toward him. "Is that why you greenlit experimental soldier programs on minors?" No comment. Too late. Cameras had the soundbite. It would play 1,000 times before sunrise. Inside the municipal office, General Bradford sat at the end of a steel conference table, wrists zip-tied, as a DoD auditor read aloud the charges: conspiracy, unauthorized paramilitary activity, and abuse of federal protocols. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. He just stared down at the photo on the file in front of him. Tyrese Carter's face. They were never supposed to survive, he finally muttered. In a quiet office across town, Mr. Alvarez, wounded but upright, sat in front of his computer, watching the feed. He whispered, "They did more than survive, you bastard. They exposed you." He opened a message from Luis, just one line. "Safe. Thank you." He smiled faintly, then turned off the light. Meanwhile, back in Riverview's Old Town Square, a press conference was hastily organized under moonlight. Reporters waited with notepads, cameras, phones, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak. And then, through the crowd, Tyrese stepped forward. Still bloodied. Still bruised. But unbroken. The reporters gasped. Microphones thrust forward. "You're the legacy kid? You're Elijah Carter's son? Did you leak the files?" He raised a hand. "Everything I've done," he said, voice low but steady, "was to tell the truth. You called me a liar. You told me I was crazy. You tried to erase my father. You tried to erase me." Flashbulbs burst in every direction. "But we're still here. You don't get to hide behind silence anymore." One reporter pushed in. "What do you say to those calling you a national threat?" Tyrese looked directly into the lens. "I say this. If telling the truth makes me dangerous, then maybe it's the system that's broken." Behind him, the town's veterans, men who had served beside his father, began to emerge from the shadows. One by one, they walked toward him. Not in uniform. No medals. Just men with steel in their eyes. They stood beside him. With him, one placed a hand on Tyrese's shoulder. Then another. Then Hunter Whitfield walked forward and stood beside him too. "This could save my life," he said, turning to the cameras. "And I used to be one of the people who mocked him." He looked at Tyrese. "I was wrong." And for once, the cameras didn't twist it. They just captured it. Raw. Real. Unfiltered. At a secure black site outside of town, Owen sat cuffed to a steel bench, his uniform stripped, bruises across his face from resisting arrest. A lawyer stood silently beside him, reviewing the footage that would haunt his career forever. He stared at the wall, lips pressed together, fury pulsing just beneath the surface. But even in that silence, he knew one thing with certainty: he had lost. The boy he once dismissed as a Delta wannabe had just dismantled a network of lies with nothing but courage, truth, and one final legacy. Back in the hospital, Miss Loretta stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking at the soft light. Elijah leaned in. "Mama," he whispered. "It's over." Tyrese did it. Her eyes focused. A tear slid down her cheek. She tried to speak, but couldn't. Instead, she squeezed his hand. That was enough. Back in the square, Tyrese turned from the cameras and looked up at the war memorial. It was still standing, still unmarked by what had happened beneath it, still silent. But something had changed. A crowd was gathering. Students, teachers, veterans, strangers, all surrounding him, not in fear, but in respect. For the first time in his life, Tyrese Carter wasn't a target. He was the truth, the legacy. The fire they tried to bury, now burning brighter than ever. The sun cracked the horizon with a light that felt different, not just morning, but something reborn. For the first time in what felt like forever, Riverview wasn't hiding. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that follows storms. But inside City Hall, inside homes, inside classrooms, something had shifted. Silence had finally lost its grip. Tyrese Carter stood alone in front of the war memorial, the same one where blood nearly spilled and truth had finally surfaced. His fingers brushed the edge of the stone, tracing the engraved names. Soldiers. Forgotten ghosts. And somewhere in the silence, he felt his father's footsteps approaching without needing to look back. Elijah joined him wordlessly, the silence between them no longer a wall, but a bond. One forged in fire, tempered by betrayal, sealed by truth. "You ever wonder what they'd write on your stone?" Tyrese asked softly, not moving his eyes from the wall. Elijah exhaled slowly. "I used to. Not anymore." "Why not?" "Because you already carved something better." He paused. "You made sure I didn't die a ghost." Tyrese looked up at him. "You never were a ghost. They just tried to make you one." And with that, he stepped back, revealing what he'd done. Where an old plaque had once read a generic dedication to fallen heroes, it now bore a new inscription, laser-etched just hours ago with Ree's help and a classified engraver only someone like Elijah could access. Master SGT, Elijah Carter. Black Ops classified. Not forgotten. Never erased. Elijah didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His hand reached out and rested on his son's shoulder, steady, proud, unshaking. Then came the sound of footsteps, first one, then dozens. Veterans, students, teachers, even Principal Morgan and Councilman Whitfield's wife, who had publicly denounced her husband and resigned from the council. They weren't there to mourn. They were there to witness. Because something had ended, yes, but something far bigger had begun. Luis arrived, bandage still fresh across his jaw, but his smile wide. They cleared my family, he said. The whole asylum process is moving. And someone from Homeland just called my dad to apologize. Tyrese smiled faintly. They should do more than that. Yeah, Luis nodded. But for now, this is a start. He handed Tyrese a small box. From Ree. Inside, a phone, clean, encrypted, zero trace. One message, you lit the match. Keep it burning. News crews lingered at the edge of the square, but this wasn't for them. This wasn't a photo op. It was for the people who had doubted, for the ones who were silenced, and for the ones who would never speak again. Tyrese walked up the steps of the memorial and turned, facing the crowd. He didn't shout, didn't gesture, just spoke. This town taught me to keep quiet, told me to fall in line, said my pain wasn't real, said my history didn't matter. But here's the truth. He glanced at the stone behind him. I come from warriors, not monsters. My father didn't abandon me. He protected me. And when I was mocked, labeled, humiliated, I thought maybe I was broken. But I wasn't. I was trained, prepared. His voice hardened. The system doesn't get to win just because it buries its mistakes. Not this time. A student in the crowd yelled out, "What happens now?" Tyrese smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a kid anymore. It was a soldier's calm. Now we rebuild. And we watch each other's backs. Applause didn't erupt. No one cheered wildly. But every head nodded. Every eye stayed locked. Because they weren't hearing a speech. They were hearing a warning. A promise. A vow. Later that day, inside the Pentagon, a secure meeting took place. 5 starched suits sat in judgment over the events of Riverview. Operation Black Echo is burned. Irretrievably, one muttered. Public trust is damaged. Badly. What about the boy? Another asked. Tyrese Carter. What do we do with him? The eldest of them, a woman with war in her eyes, leaned forward. You don't do anything. You don't touch him. He's not a variable anymore. He's a constant. Then what do we call this? One of the men asked. She answered without flinching. A reckoning. Back in Riverview, Miss Loretta was discharged. She stood with Elijah at the same bus stop where the nightmare began, cane in hand, skin thinner than before but spirit unchanged. How long you think peace lasts this time? She asked. Elijah helped her into the seat. Long enough for the next generation to learn how to fight smarter. And Tyrese. He's already beyond us. She looked out over the street. He ever tell you what he wants to be? Once, Elijah said. He told me he didn't want to be a soldier. He wanted to be a builder. Of what? Of systems that don't need guns to be fair. As dusk approached, Tyrese stood on the rooftop of Riverview High, looking down at the town. His phone buzzed. A notification. #Legacy Protocol had reached 30 million tweets. He turned the phone off. He'd said what needed saying. Now came the part that mattered, living it. And far below, a small group of freshmen gathered near the gym, pointing at the side wall where someone had painted, illegally, probably, an image of Tyrese Carter standing in front of the American flag, beneath it one phrase in black block letters. We remember the ones who weren't meant to be remembered. Tyrese didn't smile. He just walked back down the stairs and into the future. In a world where silence is weaponized and truth is buried beneath polished lies, courage is no longer optional, it's essential. Tyrese Carter didn't have money, power, or a microphone. What he had was conviction. And that was enough to bring a government operation to its knees. This story reminds us, you don't need to wear a uniform to fight for justice. You don't need a title to expose the truth. And you're never too young, or too underestimated, to light a fire that forces the world to look up. Because real change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts with the one voice that refuses to be silenced. This isn't just a story about betrayal and redemption. It's a blueprint for every person who's ever been told to sit down, shut up, or stay in your place. Tyrese didn't. And because of that, systems cracked, legacies were reclaimed, and a nation was forced to reckon with what it pretended not to see. If this story shook something in you, don't scroll away. Like if you believe the next Tyrese Carter could be watching right now. Comment your favorite moment or lesson. Even just one line can wake someone up. Subscribe for more true power storytelling. Because silence helps no one, but stories like these, they can change everything. Be the spark. Share the story. The world is listening now.